Hi everyone, Steve here. Today I will speak about those of you out there ambitious leaders. And in this video, I want to walk you through 6 habits that great leaders practice over and over again. Not theory, not corporate fluff. You know how much I hate that. So not the kind of leadership advice that sounds good on LinkedIn, but falls apart the moment you walk into a difficult meeting. These are practical habits that change how people experience you as a leader. And I want you to listen to this with one honest question in mind. Which one of these habits am I avoiding? That's what you should be asking yourself. Because usually the habit you are avoiding is the one that is quietly limiting your leadership skills. Most people think great leadership comes from confidence, charisma, job title, experience, or being the smartest person in the room. Well, it doesn't. Those things may get you noticed, but they're not what keeps people following you when the pressure starts building, when the business gets messy, when targets are slipping, when morale drops, when people are tired, and when everyone is looking around wondering who's actually going to step up and make sense of the chaos. The real difference between average leaders and great leaders is usually not one big dramatic moment. It is the habits they repeat when nobody is clapping, nobody's watching, and nobody is handing them a perfect set of conditions. Because the truth is, your leadership is not shaped by what you say you believe. It is shaped by what you consistently do. So habit number 1, great leaders pre-decide what really matters. One of the biggest mistakes leaders make is that they let the day decide for them. They open their laptop, see what is screaming the loudest, respond to the latest message, jump into the latest issue, chase the latest escalation, and by the end of the day, they're exhausted. But they have not necessarily moved anything really meaningful forward. They were busy, but they were not leading. Great leaders operate differently. They pre-decide what really matters before the noise arrives. That sounds simple, but it is a serious leadership discipline. Because when you do not decide ahead of time what really matters, urgency will always beat importance. Someone else's panic will become your priority. Someone else's poor planning will become your workload. Someone else's emotional reaction will become your own agenda. And before you know it, your calendar is full, your mind is really scattered, your team is dependent, and your leadership has turned into constant reaction. Pre-deciding means you do not leave your standards, your priorities, or your operating rhythm to chance. You decide ahead of time how you run meetings. You decide ahead of time what deserves your attention. You decide ahead of time what gets escalated and what does not. You really spend that time to define ahead of time where you need to be involved and where your team needs to own the outcome. This is where many leaders expose themselves. They say they want to be strategic, but their diary says they are reactive. They say they want empowered teams, but their behavior says every decision must come through them. They say they want focus, but they allow every meeting, every message, and every interruption to have equal weight. That is not leadership, my friends. That is availability pretending to be value. A strong leader pre-decides. For example, you might pre-decide that no meeting happens without a clear purpose, a decision needed, and an owner at the end. You might pre-decide that your first hour of the day is not for email, but for the work that actually moves the business forward. You may take that decision that every one-to-one with your team includes development, not just task updates. You might pre-decide that you will not rescue people from problems they're capable of solving themselves. That last one is also very important because many leaders do not have a time management problem. They have a boundary problem disguised as helpfulness. They keep stepping in, they keep fixing things, they keep answering questions, they keep becoming the shortcut, and then they wonder why their team does not grow. Pre-deciding protects you from becoming a bottleneck. It gives you a leadership operating system. It means you're not relying on mood, energy, pressure, or emotions to decide how you behave. You always know what matters, and you have built your week around it. The question is not whether you are busy. Of course, you're busy. We all know this. Everyone is busy. The question is, are you busy by design or busy by accident? Great leaders make that decision before the week makes it for them. Habit number 2. Great leaders choose the hard right over the easy wrong. This is where leadership becomes uncomfortable because sooner or later, every leader faces a moment where the easy option and the right option are not the same thing. The easy option is to avoid the difficult conversation. The right option is to have it. The easy option is to tolerate poor behavior because the person gets results. The right option is to protect the culture of the team before that culture quietly lowers its standards. The easy option is to tell senior leaders what they want to hear. The right option is to tell the truth in a way they can actually use. The easy option is to keep tweaking a broken process. The right option is to admit the process is broken and redesign it properly. This is where average leaders lose credibility, not because they do not know what needs to happen, but because they keep postponing the thing that needs to happen. And let's be honest, most leaders know exactly which conversation they are avoiding. They know which person is damaging the team, for example. They know which process is wasting time. They know which project is pretending to be healthier than it really is. They know which meeting is pointless. They know which customer issue keeps recurring because nobody has had the courage to fix the root cause of it. But knowing is not leadership. Acting is leadership. The hard right is difficult because it usually makes things more uncomfortable before it makes them better. That is why so many people avoid it. They tell themselves they're being patient, diplomatic, or collaborative, when in reality, they're just delaying pain. And delayed pain usually gets more expensive at the end. If someone on your team is underperforming and you keep softening the feedback, you're not being kind, you're extending confusion. If a project is failing and you keep presenting it as on track with some risks, you are not being politically smart, you're reducing trust. If your team is overwhelmed and you keep accepting more work without challenging capacity, you're not being supportive. You're allowing the team to burn quietly. Great leaders do not run towards conflict because they enjoy it. They run towards truth because they understand the cost of avoidance. There is a mature way to do this. You do not need to be aggressive. You do not need to embarrass people. You do not need to walk into every room acting like the hard truth police. But you do need to be honest enough to say, hey, this is not working. You need to be clear enough to say, here's the behavior that needs to change today. You need to be disciplined enough to say, we're not going to keep repeating the same mistake and calling it progress. That is what people respect. They may not always enjoy it in the moment, but they respect it because deep down people know when a leader is willing to face reality. The painful decision you're avoiding may be the exact decision standing between your current leadership and your next level of impact. So ask yourself honestly, where am I choosing the easy wrong because the hard right feels inconvenient? That answer will tell you more about your leadership than any personality test ever will. Habit number 3. Great leaders put people first without becoming weak. Now, this one gets misunderstood. When people hear people first leadership, they sometimes think it means being soft, overly nice, endlessly available, or trying to make everyone happy. That is not leadership. That is emotional babysitting. People first leadership does not mean avoiding standards. It means remembering that performance comes through people, not around them. The best leaders care about people deeply, but they do not confuse care with weakness. They can be kind and demanding, They can be supportive and clear. They can listen well and still make hard decisions. That balance is where leadership maturity lives. Because if you only care about results, people eventually feel used. But if you only care about feelings, performance eventually drops. Great leaders know how to hold both. They care about the person and they care about the standards. People first leadership starts with attention. Do you actually know what is happening with your team, or do you only know what is happening with their workload? Do you understand who is stretched, who is growing, who is disengaging, who is quietly carrying too much, and who needs a stronger challenge? You cannot lead people well if you only interact with them through tasks. A lot of leaders are transactional without realizing it. Every conversation is about a deadline, a metric, an issue, a project, a customer, or a problem. And then they wonder why their team does not feel connected to them. People do not give discretionary effort to leaders who only notice them when something needs doing. That does not mean you need to become everyone's best friend. Absolutely not. You should not. That creates its own problems. But people need to feel that you see them as human beings, not just capacity on a resource plan. Sometimes that is as simple as asking a better question in a one-to-one, not how are you, in the automatic way people ask when they do not really want an answer, but something more useful. What is taking more energy than it should right now? That is the right question. What are you dealing with that I may not be seeing? Where do you need more clarity from me? What part of your role is stretching you in a good way and what part is just draining you? Those questions change the relationship because they show that you are paying attention. But here is the hard edge. If you say you care about your team, then you also need to care enough to lead them properly. That means giving feedback before frustration builds. It means setting expectations before people drift. It means removing blockers. It means dealing with poor behavior quickly. It means not letting your strongest people carry your weakest people forever. People first leadership is not about being liked. It is about being trusted. And trust is built when people know you care about them, but they also know you will not allow standards to collapse. The strongest leaders make people feel two things at the same time. I matter here, and the work matters too. That combination is absolutely powerful. Habit number 4. Great leaders finish what they start. There's a simple leadership habit that is becoming very rare: follow through. Not ideas, not intentions, not big speeches about what we're going to do. Follow through. Great leaders finish what they start. They do not create excitement and then just disappear. They do not launch initiatives and then let them drift. They do not make promises in meetings and then hope everyone forgets about them. They do not confuse starting with leading. This matters because teams become cynical when leaders do not follow through. People remember. They remember the project that was announced with energy and then quietly died. They remember the feedback session where everyone shared issues and nothing changed. They remember the new way of working that lasted 2 weeks. They remember the leader who said, "Leave it with me," and then never came back. Every time that happens, trust drops a little. Not always dramatically, sometimes quietly, but it does drop. And once a team stops believing that leadership will follow through, they stop giving full effort to new initiatives. It's as simple as that. They sit back, they wait, they protect themselves. They think, let's see if this is real before we invest too much time and energy. That is what poor follow through creates. Great leaders understand that finishing matters because credibility is built at the end, not at the announcement. This does not mean every initiative has to continue forever. Sometimes good leadership means stopping something that no longer makes sense. But even then, you close the loop properly. You explain the decision. You tell people what has changed. You do not let things vanish into some kind of organizational fog. Finishing what you start always means defining the finish line properly. Many leaders create vague work because they have vague thinking. They say things like improve communication, increase accountability, enhance customer experience, or drive better performance. But nobody knows what finished looks like. That is not a plan, that is just a slogan. A real leader defines the line. By when, owned by whom, measured how, what changes when this is done, what behavior will be different, what result are we expecting, what do we stop doing once this is delivered. That level of clarity may feel basic, but it is often missing. And when it is missing, teams waste energy trying to interpret leadership instead of executing the work. Great leaders do not leave people guessing. They define the outcome. They create the rhythm. They track the progress. They remove all the blockers and close that loop. That is what finishing looks like. A leader who follows through becomes predictable in the best possible way. People learn that when you say something matters, it actually matters. When you commit to something, you come back to it. When you ask others to deliver, you hold yourself to the same standard. That is how you build authority without needing to constantly assert it. You become credible because your actions keep matching your words. Habit number 5. Great leaders fuel their own fire. This one matters more than most leaders admit. Leadership is very demanding, we all know this. It takes energy, not just physical energy, but emotional energy, mental energy, and sometimes even spiritual energy, depending on how you frame your life. And the longer you lead, the more you realize that nobody else can be responsible for keeping you inspired. Your boss cannot do it. Your team cannot do it. Your company cannot do it. Your job title definitely cannot do it. You have to fuel your own fire. That does not mean pretending to be motivated every day. Nobody is. Some days you're just tired. Some days you're frustrated. Some days you're dealing with politics, blockers, difficult people, fires, poor decisions, budget constraints, unrealistic expectations, and problems that should have been solved years ago. That is real leadership. But great leaders do not let temporary frustration become their permanent operating mode. They know how to reconnect with the reason behind the work, because there is a difference between motivation and conviction. Motivation is useful, but it is temporary. It depends on conditions. It comes and goes. It is easy to feel motivated when the project is new, the role is fresh, the team is excited, and the results are really visible. Conviction is different. Conviction keeps you steady when the work becomes repetitive, when progress is slow, when people disappoint you, and when nobody seems to understand the weight you're carrying. That is why great leaders keep reminding themselves that what they are really here to do. Not just the job description, not just the title, not just the monthly update, the real purpose. Maybe your role is to create clarity where people have been living in confusion. Maybe it is to raise standards in a team that has accepted mediocrity far too long. Maybe it is to protect customers from broken processes. Maybe it is to develop people who do not yet see their own potential. Maybe it is to turn around an operation that has been surviving instead of improving. Whatever it is, you need to stay connected to it. Because if you do not, leadership becomes admin with pressure attached. And that is when leaders become cynical. They stop inspiring others because they are no longer inspired themselves. They still attend meetings, still answer emails, still make decisions, but something in their leadership becomes flat. People can feel it. You cannot lead with energy you do not have. So you need habits that refuel you. That may mean protecting thinking time. It may mean reading, walking, training, journaling, praying, or spending time with people who sharpen you rather than drain you. It may mean stepping back once a week and asking, what did I actually move forward this week that actually matters? It may also mean removing some things that are constantly draining your leadership energy. Because sometimes the issue is not that you need more motivation. Sometimes the issue is that you keep allowing your energy to leak into things that do not deserve it. Pointless meetings, repeated conversations, unclear ownership, avoided decisions, people who bring problems but never solutions and accountability, work that should have been delegated months ago. Fueling that fire is not just about adding inspiration, it is also about removing friction. Great leaders protect their energy because they understand their energy affects the room. When you walk into a meeting scattered, cynical, irritated, or distracted, that has a cost. When you walk in clear, grounded, and purposeful, that also has a cost, but it is a good one. Your team often borrows emotional cues from you. So the question is not, am I allowed to feel tired? Of course you are. The better question is, what am I doing to make sure tired does not become my leadership identity? That is your responsibility. Habit number 6, great leaders show backup. This may be the most important one because every leader eventually gets hit. You will have moments where something fails, a project goes sideways, a senior stakeholder loses confidence, a team member disappoints you, a decision you made does not land well or the way you wanted it, a result exposes a weakness. You walk out of a meeting and think, that was not my best moment. And in those moments, leadership becomes very personal because it is easy to lead when you're winning. It is easy to speak confidently when the numbers are good, when the team is aligned, when people are praising the work, and when momentum is on your side. The real test for you is what you do after disappointment. Average leaders protect their ego. Great leaders return to the work. Average leaders blame. Great leaders learn. Average leaders withdraw. Great leaders show back up. Showing back up does not mean ignoring failure. It means refusing to be defined by it. There's a difference. Some leaders make one mistake and then become cautious forever. They stop pushing, they stop challenging, they stop taking risks, they start managing perception more than outcomes because they do not want to feel exposed again. That is how leadership shrinks. Great leaders do the exact opposite. They face the lesson, they take the hit, adjust their approach, and come back sharper. That is grit. Not noisy confidence, not fake positivity, not motivational nonsense. Grit is the quiet decision to keep going when the work is harder than you expected and when the results are slower than you wanted. And this is where I think a lot of experienced professionals need to hear the truth. At a certain stage in your career, you are not only judged by what you know, you're judged by how you respond under pressure. Do you become defensive? Do you disappear? Do you start blaming everyone else around you? Do you over explain things? Do you become passive because you're afraid of being wrong again? Or do you show back up with ownership? That is what separates people. The strongest leaders are not the ones who never doubt themselves. They're the ones who do not let doubt take the wheel. They may go home frustrated. They may replay the conversation over and over in their heads. They may feel the pressure, but they come back the next day and do what leaders do. They clarify, they reset, they apologize if needed, they make the decision, they rebuild the trust, they take the next step. That is leadership, my friends. And sometimes, if I'm being blunt, the message you need is not more complicated than this. Stop over-processing the failure. Stop waiting until you feel fully confident. Stop turning one difficult moment into a story about your entire ability. Show back up because your team does not need a perfect leader. They need a leader who keeps returning with honesty, clarity, and courage. That is how trust is built. Not because you never fall short, but because people see that when things get hard, you do not vanish. You stay in the work. So if we bring all this together, great leadership is not built on one dramatic speech or on one impressive title or one strong quarter. It is built through habits. You pre-decide what matters so the day does not control you. You choose the hard ride because avoiding reality always becomes more expensive. You put people first without lowering the standard. You finish what you start because follow through is where credibility is built. And you fuel your own fire because nobody else can carry your leadership energy for you. And finally, you show back up because setbacks are not the end of your leadership story unless you allow them to be. Now, here's the part I want you to remember. You do not need to fix all 6 habits at once. That is where people make leadership development too complicated. They listen to something like this, agree with all of it, feel motivated for 10 minutes, and then change nothing. Please don't do that. Pick one. Pick the habit that exposed you a little bit while you were listening. Maybe you need to pre-decide your week instead of letting everyone else on your calendar. Maybe you need to have the difficult conversations you have been avoiding. Maybe you need to reconnect with your team as people, not just performers. Maybe you need to close the loop on things you started once but you haven't finished. Or try to rebuild your own energy. Maybe you simply need to stop hiding after a difficult season and show back up properly. That is where the work starts. Because the leader you become next is not shaped by what you intend to do. It is shaped by what you repeatedly practice. And if you build better habits, you will not just become a better leader on paper. People will feel the difference in the room. People will feel the difference in the meetings, in the decisions, in the standards, and the way you carry yourself when the pressure is on. That is the real test. Not whether people call you a leader, whether they experience you as one. Thank you for watching. I will catch you on the next one. Take care.